This is CB Up for Discussion, a podcast series from Community Business where we tackle DE&I and wellbeing hot topics with special guests from across Asia.
Hello, everyone. I'm Len, Client Solutions Manager at Community Business, and I'll be your podcast host for this episode. Today, we are delighted to be up for discussion with Noelle Sinclair, founder of Diverse Minds. Noelle founded Diverse Minds, an organization dedicated to creating an inclusive future where all neurological styles are accepted and embraced. Noelle has a background of over 15 years in various corporate settings and has developed and managed global programs for various companies as well. In Hong Kong, Noelle helps organizations leverage neurodiversity to enhance team performance and business outcomes, offering specialized neurodiversity trainings for professionals and developing strategic plans, frameworks, and tools. She's also about to launch a neurodiversity e-learning platform in April 2024. So Noelle is recognized for her contributions to the field, speaking at very prominent DE&I events like the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Summit by SCMP, TEDx Talks, and is also leading neurodiversity-focused workshops. So Noelle, thank you for joining us on Up for Discussion. Please, if you could introduce yourself a little bit more, as well as your day-to-day at Diverse Minds.
Sure. So, one thing I do want to add to that many people may not realize, is that I'm also autistic and ADHD. So that's an incredible part of who Noelle Sinclair is and why Diverse Minds came about. My work day looks like this. I spend it in about 3 different ways. I will spend time doing consulting work, strategic work for corporations, as well as training or awareness initiatives. And then the third part, which is probably my favorite part, are things like this, reaching out to the community and either speaking with organizations like yours, like Community Business, or simply sitting down one-on-one with a parent who may have a child who's autistic or another autistic individual. And these are really my favorite parts of what I do because I get to see the individual impact that companies like Diverse Minds and Community Business has on individuals. So my workday is a lot like that. It's split into 3 different work areas, and most days I do all 3.
Thank you, Noelle. I mean, that's really interesting to hear. And, having an individual like yourself present, especially in Hong Kong, it's important for us to raise awareness for neurodiversity. So it's great that you're here with us today. So I guess my first question would be, we want to highlight the intersectionality of gender, specifically women, and neurodiversity. So when you look into research on neurodiversity, in particular diagnosing autism and ADHD, you can find that there's a gender bias there. There's been a lot of assumptions that autism is a disorder which affects males more predominantly, and that's because men tend to be diagnosed more than women on a 4-to-1 ratio. So I guess my question for you would be, what are your thoughts on how gender bias manifests into the diagnosis as well as understanding of neurodiverse conditions?
Absolutely. To understand the gender issue, we first have to understand how the diagnosis came about. This gender bias has been from the beginning. So if we go back 100 years to when, well, not quite 100 years, 80 years to when Hans Asperger was first identifying individuals that would later be called autistic, or an older term is Asperger syndrome, he specifically excluded females from the patients that he studied. There were many reasons for this. It was tied to things like eugenics. There was pressure for him to validate the value that what he called was child professors, child geniuses, that they would essentially be protected from harm during that turbulent time in World War II. Females were systematically excluded from that time on. And it has continued. That sort of set the stage for how autism and Asperger's syndrome, which by the way are considered under autism. Asperger's is an older term. But that really set the stage for how females have been excluded. The other issue that we have is a prevalent issue of socialness. So much of the reason why females, myself included, are not diagnosed until later in life is because we have been socialized differently. Our actions, how we present ourselves as a child, including how people even speak to us. For example, when we're younger, females will have their parents or other individuals and adults speak to them in a more emotional language. The social expectations for us to listen, to be quiet, to be cordial, to be empathetic, to fit in, to mold into this acceptable ladylike persona is something that has caused us issues for many reasons, not just diagnosis, but it causes us to mask more. So, even though you can have a child, two children, let's say you have two children, one is male, one is female, they can both have very similar symptoms. But a male autistic child, they can be labeled, oh, well, he's just very outspoken, he's very literal, he's a boy, he's going to be aggressive, but if you have a female, how society views that, and this goes across many cultures, not just from the West where I'm from, but the female will be looked at as, oh, she's moody, she's quiet, oh, she's just having emotional problems if she has an outburst. So society really has created this gender bias. So many types of biases, social, medical, are built into this, and there's a long history. It's very, very difficult to overcome. And I experienced it myself, not only as a child, but in the work world and even today. And I still see young women today, although it is getting better, which is good. More awareness, more understanding of what autism is, the more that we can overcome stereotypes and biases and stigma, the better we are at identifying females on the spectrum or females who are ADHD. It first affected my ability to get diagnosed because I masked my symptoms, or not symptoms, but I masked my behaviors and I hid what was troubling me and the difficulties I had, because that was the expectation for me to be the docile, conforming female. In business, it often had a very similar role because I am by nature, my autistic brain is very literal. It's very direct. I'm always asking why or how or why. And this can come across other individuals as being very aggressive. There's less nice words that I have been called when I was never intended to be that way. It's just in my nature to be very literal. And at the time, I didn't know that I was autistic, but I think if I had, that might have lessened that bias. Instead, I didn't know, the people around me didn't know, and I was conforming, and it's very complex, this thing called masking, but masking is very difficult. It's dangerous and it's unhealthy for us to do. That did lead to mental health issues.
No, like you spoke of societal and cultural norms that go into these biases. And, that leads, like, I wonder, right, being in Asia and being an Asian person myself, I'm not very aware of these norms that affect the biases because it's my everyday. So as an observer, what do you think, like particularly in Asia, because of your work here in Hong Kong, have you noticed that there's something different with the way we diagnose people as opposed to in the West?
I wouldn't say that it's necessarily different. I would say it's a little bit behind, only because culturally there are differences in laws and regulations. regarding things like diversity, equity, and inclusion. So if you look at a country like the US or Canada, what's driving a lot of the awareness in society as well as better medical diagnosis is actually the laws. Because there are laws and people have a vehicle to go to court and have litigation, and there's actual repercussions. So if we look at Asia, one of the things that I first noticed is that the laws are very weak. For example, ADHD is covered under some laws in Hong Kong, but it really hasn't been tried out. There's not a lot of case studies and case law that have come about that people are aware of. And I think it would be incredibly difficult if you were ADHD, for example, or autistic, had an issue with your employer and actually tried to do something through the legal system. There's not a lot of precedent. So that was one of the first things that I noticed. The second is that culturally, it is shameful. This is not unlike other countries I've lived in. For example, Dubai and the UAE, very similar in that if you are different, if you are outside of what the accepted norm is, that is a source of shame, not only for families, but for individuals themselves. And there's a lot of covering it up, not speaking about it, not wanting other people to know. Those two things are the negative sides that I've seen. So I shouldn't say negative, I should say challenging. Those are very challenging things. But also I want to mention the positive side, which is I have met so many young people here in Hong Kong, mostly at the university level, high school and university level, local to Hong Kong, who are excited to learn more. They want to know more about neurodivergence, but they also want a better world. They're interested in talking about these issues. They're interested, many of them I've met are autistic or ADHD themselves, and they're interested in connecting with others like themselves. So I truly believe that that is one vehicle of change, is that the youth are interested. The other amazing positive thing that I have seen here in Hong Kong that is just on fire compared to other places is that a lot of global companies like EY, HSBC, Standard Chartered Bank, they are very much interested in what neurodiversity is and how to be more inclusive. And they're not just doing these as tick boxes. There are people who are passionate about it and people who are looking at integrating neurodiversity much more better within the workplace. So yes, there are challenges. There's also positives, and Hong Kong is not alone, and Asia Pacific in general is not alone. Many of the same struggles you'll find in other parts of the world as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's really insightful. For me, I've not really paid too much attention to what corporates were especially doing. And so it's nice to hear that they're actually doing a lot that's beyond performative actions. So
Yeah.
It's very good to hear.
One of the things that I will mention that's very exciting is I'm working with a group of these financial organizations in Hong Kong. And the purpose of this working group, we're having many sessions over this year with a specific group, which includes HSBC, Standard Chartered, EY, JP Morgan, Bloomberg, Societe Generale, and it's all sponsored and hosted by Herbert Smith Freehills, which is a global law firm. The goal of this working group is to identify what are the main challenges and the opportunities for neurodiversity to do better, not just in Hong Kong, but in Asia specifically. What's even more wonderful about this group is that we're only geared to have 4 sessions this year, but the group has decided that it is going to live on after this, and that one of the main purposes is to invite new and different organizations to participate, a wider variety of corporates as well as a wider variety of NGOs, with the goal of making the business world a catalyst to be more, to help the culture catch up. So to be more neurodivergent in business, but also with a view to helping move society along as well. And I think that's really a wonderful thing. And I oftentimes do not see that in DE&I. Oftentimes, it's usually people who are incredibly passionate who lead the way in society. But here we have a group of companies who are saying, look, business, we have a responsibility to our communities and to our people, and let's use this opportunity to pave the way forward. And I think that is something incredibly unique to this group of companies in Hong Kong, and kudos to them. It's quite exciting and inspiring.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that if you were not here, if you weren't doing the work you do, then you wouldn't be able to support. And I think your support is the most valuable. So it would be I'm excited to hear what comes out of this because of you. So speaking of your work, right?
Yes.
I want to know, or I'm curious to know, with your personal experiences, if you're comfortable to share, obviously, how has that shaped your work? Like what got you into this and how has it kind of progressed you into this journey?
Well, I both of my children are neurodivergent. I also had a struggle with mental health myself most of my life, because most of my life I didn't know that I was neurodivergent. Being autistic and ADHD is incredibly stressful, and you don't see that. It's very internal. So people like myself, who I'm actually an extrovert. Yes, I am autistic, but I'm also an extrovert. But it takes up a huge amount of energy. I have been close to suicide myself many times. Thankfully, I made it through, but a very close friend of mine, my best friend from university, found out that he was autistic almost at the same time that I did. We're both adults, and unfortunately, he ended up one of the autistic statistics, which is that we are up to 9 times more likely to die by suicide than the general population. And that's also the highest of all disability groups. And we lost him. And he was just a brilliant individual. And he could have offered the world so much. And it was all of these things, seeing my children, their challenge, even though they're grown now, I see them, the same challenges that they have in university. My friend's challenge, my personal challenge. And I just didn't, why can't the world be a better place for all people to work? And we know from science, if we look at cognitive diversity, which is neurodiversity is a subset of cognitive diversity, we know from research that our communities and our businesses, that we as even teams function better when we are diverse. And the potential that we lose when we exclude anyone, whether it's because they're neurodivergent, they're LGBTQ, because of their race, their gender, we are losing ideas. We're losing all of that experience that individual brings to the table. And so that is what shapes my world, is in the work that I do, is to make sure that we as humans are leveraging everyone for all of our benefits. And by leverage, I don't mean to associate someone's value with their productivity. That's not what I mean. I just mean that when we make a place for everyone within society, when everyone is able to come to the table and to bring their authentic self to the table, and then they can be who they are and give, what they have to offer, we're all better. And that's what Diverse Minds is about making the world better, at least in the workplace, because that's my focus, for all types of individuals, for everyone's benefit.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really sorry about your friend, and thank you for sharing your story. It's not easy to do that, and it's inspirational to everyone who is neurodiverse or maybe have yet to be diagnosed, but experiencing feelings of, similarities. And it takes a lot to share your own story. So thank you for that. And your specialty is helping the workplace, right? So I want to know, what can the workplace do to support individuals that may or may not be diagnosed yet, but are neurodivergent or having these characteristics that are, they might not know yet, but just giving them that support for them to be able to nurture themselves?
Well, that is such a great question. It's also very complex. The first thing I would say is for people to understand that there are simple things that you can do, but you as an individual at the end of the day, really, you need the support of your organization. So it's great for awareness. That's the first place that you can start, is just to be aware. If you have time to learn about neurodivergence, autism, or ADHD, absolutely, you can read those. If you don't have time to do that, one of the best things that you can do is just to be open and to communicate. Let's say you run into an individual, you think this individual is struggling. You think even, well, maybe this individual has ADHD. Well, you don't need a diagnosis. One of the best things that you can do is to simply ask that individual, I noticed that you're struggling. Is there something that we could do better? Is there some way that we could work better? Is there some way that we could do things differently that would help you? Some way to open the door to conversation. That communication can go a very long way. And the reason why you have to approach things individually is because every autistic person, every ADHD, or every dyslexic, they're not the same. They will have different strengths, different challenges, and one thing that works for one individual won't work for the other. So simply being able to look at that person as an individual, have a conversation with them, a quick question or two to see if there's a way that you can help support them. The onus isn't only on that individual to fit in. Other than communication, it starts getting very difficult because many of the things that you would do, so for example, we want to talk about workplace accommodations or supports, those things might actually need your company, your organization to also buy into. So it can be very difficult, but I can give you some examples of other easy things. Some things aren't difficult. So for example, those of us who are ADHD or autistic or dyslexic really appreciate having materials that you might present at a meeting ahead of time because we need extra time to process. I think most people would benefit from that, which is also one of the benefits of adapting workplace accommodations and making them available to everyone in the org, is that when you do something like this, it benefits everyone. Other simple things are having a very straightforward agenda when you're setting a meeting, making sure that people understand what you expect to achieve in that meeting. So if you're going to ask me on the spot during that meeting to give you feedback, I, as an ADHD or an autistic or dyslexic, might not be able to process things quite in the same way that you do. I might need to go back and think about it. So if you allow people a little extra time and don't put them on the spot, say, okay, here's the question I have for you. Can you send me this answer in a day, 2 days, an hour from now? Because putting that pressure on individuals right during the meeting, right after they've tried to consume a lot of information, can be very challenging. And again, these are simple things to do on your own. When you start getting into more complex things, again, you are likely going to need the support of your line management all the way up to a leadership. And it has to be, these things have to be built within the organization in policies and processes and recruitment. It's not a matter of just going out and saying, okay, we want to hire autistic people and ADHDers. Let's go out and find, where they are and see if they want to work for us. It's a lot more complex than that. But awareness and communication, those are two things that are fairly easy for anyone to do.
Thank you for those tips. I mean, it's definitely something that we should adhere to as well here at Community Business. It's something that I will do my best to strive towards as well. So it's not just applicable to large corporations or or organizations that already have neurodivergent people. It's anywhere, because you never know if someone's neurodivergent or not. And yeah, so thank you for sharing those tips.
We are trying to put a Band-Aid on things now with neurodivergent individuals, focusing on awareness, but at some point, it would be more efficient if we were to be focusing on how to design our businesses and our processes in a universal way. Much like architects or interior designers do universal design, we should be designing our businesses like that with everyone in mind. How do we make how we do business more inclusive for everyone without having to go back and then put on these Band-Aids. And I'm hoping that in the future, we will be able to do just that.
Yeah, and I think this is a great first step for everyone, is exactly what you said, is to build awareness and
Absolutely.
learn what the journey looks like. So thank you so much for your time on this podcast. Thank you for joining up for discussion. And, we hope that the success with working with all the corporations that you've said will show itself very soon, and we can learn something from it even if we aren't a part of it yet.
Oh, absolutely. And we will be publishing the results either, well, we're not sure where we're going to publish the results, but the whole reason of doing this is to make those findings available to everyone.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
so we'll keep you guys posted on when those are ready.
Thank you so much, Noelle.
Thank you for listening to CB Up for Discussion. For more information about our work across Asia, head to the Community Business website.